It's time, my friends, for another Devo tip on the book of Revelation. This week, we're going to look at chapter 20, verses 1 through 3 again. It's part 2. Okay. Well, we learned last week that the binding of Satan began during Jesus' earthly ministry. But it was because of Jesus' triumphant resurrection that the angel in Revelation 20 was able to seize, bind, and throw Satan into a sealed pit. Well, this certainly explains why Satan enlists 3 little helpers. The picture painted here is not total constraint, but limitation. You can see the same idea in 2 Thessalonians 2. It's called the restraint. Satan cannot totally dupe the nations into eradicating Christianity for 1,000 years. That's what it says in Revelation 20. 1,000 years? What does 1,000 years signify? It's difficult to assume that the 1,000 years is literal. In the Bible, 1,000 is rarely meant to be taken with precision. So let's look at some examples. When the psalmist says that God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills, he's not counting the exact number of cows or hills in Psalm 50. He's saying everything belongs to the Lord. Here's another one. When the sons of Korah sing, "A day in your courts is better than 1,000 elsewhere," they're not looking at a calendar. In Psalm 84, they're singing about the sweet moments in God's presence that far exceeds the best destination vacation packages we can put together. Here's another one. When Joshua tells his army, "One of you puts to flight 1,000," he's not getting out a calculator. He's reminding them that it is the Lord your God who fights on their behalf in Joshua 23. So when Isaiah says, "The least will become 1,000," he means when the time is right, the Lord will make it happen in Isaiah 60, verse 22. Another one. When Job admits, if one wished to contend with God, one could not answer him once in 1,000 times. He's not meticulously adding up all the times he struggled with God. No, Job is musing over the inability of human beings to adequately challenge God, which happens to him later in the book. Here's another one. Solomon, when he searched for a good friend, he says, "One man among 1,000 I found," in Ecclesiastes 7. What does he mean? His search for an earnest friend did not stop at the 1/1000th guy. His perspective reveals the corruption all around him. He could only find one good friend. And when Moses says that God keeps covenant and steadfast love to 1,000 generations, he's not suggesting that anyone that is born after that is toast. No, he's saying that the Lord remains faithful even when his people are unfaithful, for he cannot deny himself. That's what Paul says to Timothy. Here's another one. When the psalmist says 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday, he means that God regards human history the way we reflect on one day. Peter must have reflected on this psalm. He says, "Do not overlook this one fact, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as 1 day." He's encouraging us not to lose heart. For the next verse says, "The Lord is not slow in his promises to fulfill them." So what does 1,000 years signify? If we consider all these examples together, the main point is not a literal 1,000 years, nor a figurative long time. No, 1,000 years is not about the length of time. It's about the fulfillment of God's promises at the opportune time. Simply put, 1,000 years means the fullness of time. So, never in 1,000 years, not at any point, under absolutely any circumstance, should 1,000 years be considered anything other than an idiom. Satan is bound. He cannot stop the gospel train. When the 1,000 years were ended, that is, at the opportune time, Satan will be released for a little while. That's Revelation 20, verse 3. You'll have to tune in for that next week.